Welcome to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're talking about the quarterfinals for the Berlin Major, the Rainbow Six Siege Major, ongoing at the moment. So we have 3 games left to be played, but we have 4 games to talk about today. So here we have the bracket, and I mean, probably you're already aware of how things went, but if not, we saw a 2-0 from XSET over Wolves. We saw a 2-0 by Rogue over G2. We saw W7M take down Elevate on map 3 and FaZe take down Furia on map 3. And this isn't actually the order things went down in, so I'm unsure why they're listed here in this order. They maybe they mixed it up last minute, and I think it was this match first, right? And then the XSET game, and then this game, and then this game. So I think part of the reason they did that is so that the APAC game could be early in the day. Well, so that it lined up better with APAC time zone, so those people could watch it, and then maybe they put the teams that are all in more Western sort of time zones later in the day. So like Furia, FaZe are both, they're not North America, but they're both from Brazil, and so much more Western time zone than anything in Europe or APAC or anything like that. So I think that's how they sort of arrange that. Anyways, I guess I have them all pulled up, the match stats, so we're just going to go in order of I think I have them pulled up in chronological order, and then we'll come back to this and talk about the matchups for tomorrow. Okay, so first game, yeah, Elevate versus W7M, and I have the stats here, and maybe I'll scroll up, but we'll just mostly talk about the stats. Yeah, finally we see Onigiri pull up a big performance, but it's not good enough to get his team over the line. He might have even been the worst player on his team coming into the day, but I think really it was Mr. Punch and Mark really showing up a lot of the time, and maybe their names were just much more noticeable because they are the new additions to the squad, and DCH and Sapper have been here since well, for however long, but they're not new. They've been here longer than the other two, along with Onigiri. And then on W7M, it's pretty well a team effort. Nobody doing especially well. Strange to see Keys at the bottom here going negative, both on kills and on entry kills. And then GDN doing fine enough. 7 plants on the board is quite a lot, but I guess it's over the course of 3 maps. And then Volts, JV, and especially Herds on top. So all 3 of them putting up pretty good frag numbers, all of them positive in kills, and only Herds slightly negative on the entry. And okay, so that's sort of how that game went down in terms of the stats, and I'll just look at these are the exact scores. So W7M won pretty dominantly on Cafe, and then Elevate won a close game on Bank, and then an even closer game was won by W7M on Border. So a lot of people thought that this was going to be the grand final matchup, and it's unfortunate we had to see it in the quarterfinals. And yeah, I mean, I suppose it delivered, going all 3 maps, and then overtime on the last map. So it is W7M that advances. Let's talk about the next matchup. Okay, so XSET versus Wolves, and yeah, this ended up being a 2-0 for XSET. I think surprising a bit, but I'm not actually that surprised. As sort of exactly what I said happened. Exactly what I said could happen did happen. We see Mowgli getting really shut down here, and Wolves end up getting punished for it. Good performances coming out from P4 and Shinka, but really tough showings for Bibu and Rise in this game. And of course, the lack of kills from these two, along with Mowgli not putting up his really impressive numbers he's been putting up this tournament, led to their downfall. And yeah, finally we see a pretty good game coming out from Spirits, and I think that's sort of what I said needed to happen. The consistently good players on XSET needed to remain pretty consistent, and then probably Spirits or Gomez needed to maybe not pop off, but do better. So Kino definitely worse than he's been doing this tournament, but as a support player, I don't think these numbers are too terrible. There's like no plants in this matchup. And then Yaga and Diaz continue to be pretty consistent and pretty good. And then yeah, Spirits definitely better than his average rating for the tournament. And then Gomez not even like that bad, just like -4.87, fine enough. And yeah, it was a 2-0. We played Clubhouse and Chalet, 2 closest matches, no overtime or anything, but XSET does take it down, and good for them. So NA remains in the tournament. APAC is out, and no matter what happened, we were still going to see at least 1 EU team and 1 LATAM team in. But I guess at this point, a LATAM team and an NA team have advanced as far as what we've talked about. Let's look at the next game. Okay, Rogue versus G2. As far as my predictions went, this is the only one I got wrong. This also, to me, sort of felt like the hardest one to call. I felt like maybe this one and the XSET versus Wolves game just felt like the hardest one to call. And maybe some people might even say the Elevate versus W7M game was tough to call. I felt like it was like pretty heavily in favor of W7M, but I wouldn't have been super shocked if Elevate took it. But this one, I think maybe a tiny bit of surprise, or at least it went again against my against my prediction, I do feel like Rogue are the better team. I just felt like G2 was sort of firing on all cylinders coming into this, and they just have such a high quality of their player quality is very high, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And by that merit, if they're playing fairly well, I think they can beat pretty much anybody in the world. But Rogue does take them down just like they did in the regular stage, and so they will be the only EU team left in the tournament. So that's G2 out, and that is Wolves out. So now it is Rogue left standing alone. So good game coming out from Spoit, good game from Crying, and then sort of mediocre from Kanto, but fine enough. And then Leon and DPEC not quite as good, but perfectly fine considering they are the support players and they got the victory. And then Alabama really popping off, pretty massive stats, plus 14. This is what, like a 1.66 KD or whatever, like really high KD, and then 4 on the entry. Yeah. Citizen, not nearly as good numbers as he has put up this tournament. I think he's going to end the tournament probably with the best stats in the whole tournament, and unless somebody really gets their stats up, but most of the players that are close to him at all are also out of the tournament. And so you see quite a bit better entry coming out from Rogue, and in fact only DPEC going -1, everyone else +0 or +1, and then we have quite a bit of variety on G2, +4, +3, but then a -2, -5, -3. Doki, kind of a brutal tournament for him overall. Definitely got some stat padding in against FaZe, but just going almost double negative here, and same thing from Prano, almost going double negative as well, -5 on the entry. It's all just pretty brutal stuff. And yeah, Rogue comes out on top, but a close affair as far as 2-0 can go, double overtimes. It is what it is. And then even, I guess, a little bit of a surprise, because about 60% of the voters here thought that G2 was going to take it. And okay, on to the final game. And yeah, Furia versus FaZe. So this is the one that I felt like was the easy one to predict. And I said maybe all the other three were a little bit tricky, with some maybe a little bit more than others, but this did feel like the easy one. FaZe has such a good record over Furia historically, and usually when Furia wins, it's a pretty close game anyway. So I felt like a best of 3, maybe a little bit of a tall task for them, and everybody actually going negative on rating here, and almost everybody higher rated on FaZe than they are on Furia. Of course, Bullet just a little bit lower, and I guess nobody going positive on kills. And the entry was actually very close though. Furia actually coming on top by just 1, and yeah, Soul's really popping off, Cyber popping off as well, +14, +11, and Soul's, I mean, at this point, after this tournament, during the tournament, whatever you want to call it, maybe looks like the best support player, and again, in the tournament, but in the world. And I guess we'll see who actually ends up on top in terms of him and Kino statistically, but it just continues to be such a monster. No 1vx's, which he's sort of famous for, but I guess only 2 1vx's coming out of the whole thing, and a fair number of plants. I mean, 4 plants here, 7 plants here, but not a massive number. Hasn't been a big planting sort of tournament, and I think that's pretty much it. Let's just take a quick look at the maps here. Yeah, and we only barely went to map number 3. It was a fairly decisive win, 7-4 for FaZe on Skyscraper, and then Nailbiter on Chalet around 15, and then another fairly decisive Cafe. So yeah, FaZe walk away the victor, and Furia gets to add one map win to their head-to-head, but of course FaZe gets to add 2, and it was once again another 8-7 victory for Furia when they actually do manage to get it. And okay, so now I guess just back to the Liquipedia, and we'll talk about the matchups. So one more time, here are the scores. We saw a couple of 2-0s, a couple of 2-1s, but I guess even the 2-0s were fairly close, more so the G2 versus Rogue one. A couple of Nailbiter maps. And okay, so predictions: XF versus Rogue and W7M versus FaZe. So this is a rematch of the Copa Elite 6 Grand Final. So the top 2 teams coming out of LATAM, this most recent stage. And I can't recall if FaZe was first or second, or excuse me, if FaZe was 2nd or 3rd seed going into Copa Elite 6. I don't think they were 4th seed, and W7M was first, so they were one of the 2. But anyways, after Copa Elite 6, they definitely ended up as 1st seed FaZe, 2nd seed W7M, and then Rogue versus XSET. This is a rematch from the group stage. So, maybe in hindsight, Group A was in fact the group of death, and I don't think it's too ridiculous. We'll see how these matchups go. If this is like a really tight affair, and then if maybe, especially if one of these teams destroy one of these 2 teams in the grand final, then maybe I think it would be safe to say that. But at this point, we have which group is the one not represented here? I guess Group D is now out, and looking at it initially, it did feel like it was the weakest group, and And well, honestly, this group ended up being a big surprise with Astralis not going through, but still in a different way. But yeah, it does end up that it was sort of the weakest group, seemingly. And then we have W7M coming from Group C. Wolves just got eliminated. And then Group B, we have FaZe making it to the semifinals, the second seed. But I think it was kind of surprising when they ended up as the second seed, with G2 taking that top spot. And then, yeah, Xset and Rogue, the rematch, indeed. So, who do I think is going to win? I think it's tough to say. Of course, Xset did get a more solid win over their opponents than Rogue got over their opponents. Both 2-0s, but Xset's didn't go to overtime either time. And I guess let's just look at their head-to-heads really quickly. Did they go? They went 1-1, I believe. It'd be in here. So it was, yeah, a 7-4 victory for Rogue, and then on the rematch it was a 7-4 for Xset. Yeah, so they 7-4'd either way. Xset got the most recent win. This one's on Theme Park. This one's on Oregon. Kanto, I think wasn't this the game where Kanto went absolutely nuts? So maybe if they don't have such a massive performance from one of their players, maybe they won't beat Xset, and indeed, well, I think Kino went pretty big in that map. I'm gonna go with Xset by way for the fact that they did better in their quarterfinal matchup, and then also they topped the group over Rogue. Yes, they did go 1-1, exact same scorelines, but with Xset taking the more recent match between the two of them, and then Xset getting like a whole 4 more points in the group. Their performance in this tournament had just been more impressive. I think there's every reason to believe that they're gonna win. I also think Rogue has a fairly good shot to win, but I'm going to go with Xset. And then W7M versus FaZe. So W7M, of course, lost to FaZe in the most recent showing. They lost Copa Elite 6 last time around to, I think it was Liquid, right? So FaZe certainly didn't beat them there. I don't recall their regular stage meetings. That was maybe something to look up, but I don't think I'm actually going to do it this time. I'm on a tiny bit of a time crunch here. And so, if you think that FaZe is going to repeat because they are just a much better team, they won the last time, they're going to win this time, that might be fair. A lot of times when two teams are similar skill levels, they'll kind of go back and forth because W7M probably learned more from that match against FaZe than FaZe learned about W7M in that match. And I don't know, I'm just going to go with W7, and maybe part of that is actually the only 2 players I have left in the tournament from my fantasy draft thing are on Xset and W7M, so I'm just going to go with them. I think it's entirely possible that they do take it down. I don't think it's like heavily in FaZe's favor, but you might think it's a little bit in their favor just based on that most recent meeting between the two. But yeah, FaZe is coming in as a second seed from their group, and W7M, of course, was on top of their group by a pretty massive margin. Were they the best performing team? They were on... Yeah, Xset 15 points, 13, 16, and yeah, so they were the best performer in the group stage, dropping only 2 points, only dropping a single game, and it was even in overtime. So I'm gonna go with W7M. I mean, it's just, you gotta pick one of them, and I think it's reasonable to pick either of them. So that should set up an Xset versus W7M grand final. If that is the case, that would be NA versus LATAM, and really it's mostly Brazilians versus Brazilians, but there's still Yaga and Spirits in there to represent actual NA proper. And okay, so we'll talk about that if that is what arises after the semifinals, but for now, yeah, those are going to be my predictions. And so if you have any questions, comments, concerns, corrections, predictions, requests, anything, feel free to leave them below. A like and a subscription would be appreciated. I will catch you guys in the next video.